In today's video, I'm going to tell you 10 things you should never do in the United States. What is going on, YouTube? Greetings from my apartment here in Valencia, Spain. I've been traveling the world full-time for almost 12 months now, and one of my favorite things to do before I get to a new country is to research the things to do, but also research the things not to do. I think it's just as important to know what not to do as it is to know what to do in a country. So in today's video, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit and tell you what not to do in my country of the United States. Let me preface this by saying the United States is a huge country, and culturally it can be very different depending on what part of the country you're in. Hawaii is way different than Texas. Texas is way different than California. California is way different than New York, and so on and so on. But there are some things that apply basically throughout the country. So those are the things that I'm going to talk about today. Okay, number one, never visit just New York or Disneyworld. Anytime someone tells me they've been to the United States, it's usually one of two places. They've either been to New York or they've been to Disneyworld or Disneyland. The United States is so much more than that. It's so big and diverse. You have a zillion lakes in a place like Minnesota. You have the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. You have a Patagonia type place in Montana. You have amazing tropical beaches in a place like Hawaii. You have awesome Tex Mex food down in Texas. And you have the most amazing forests and wildlife in a place like Washington State. I know you want to see New York and Disney World, and I definitely think you should, but if you're going to plan a trip to the United States, add another location and go see something different, and it'll show you how really diverse and beautiful this country is outside of those two popular destinations. Okay, the next one on the list is a little bit more serious. Never get out of your car when you're stopped by the police. In many parts of the world, it is customary to get out of your car when the police stop you. That is not the case in the United States, and you definitely don't want to do this. Sometimes our police officers can be a little bit on edge, and getting out of the car is the wrong thing to do. So make sure you don't do that in the United States. Just stay in your car and wait for the police officer to approach your window. The third thing on the list is never forget to tip. This is something that comes up a lot in my other never do this videos, and it's usually the other side of it because in a lot of countries, it's not customary to tip. Servers in other countries don't rely on tips for their income. They're paid a higher wage, so it's not a big deal. But in the United States, servers rely on their tips to pay the bills. Normally, you should tip somewhere between 15 and 25% when you go to a restaurant, when you take a cab, when you go get your nails done, things like that. Next thing on the list is never get too close. In the US, we really like our personal space. When I was in the military, I actually lived in Italy for 2 years. I moved there in 1998, and I had never lived outside of the United States before. I had a little bit of culture shock. In Italy, Italians don't really have a sense of personal space. When you meet an Italian and greet them, even if you just met them, usually you kiss each other on the cheek. That's something in the US that we just don't do. Also, in most other countries, it's perfectly acceptable to get right up on somebody in a line or push or try to go around them. In the US, we have like a very orderly system, and we don't like people too close to us, and we don't get too close to somebody else. So yeah, just make sure you respect people's space unless they invite you in their space. Okay, the next one is a little bit political, but never say you like or you dislike Trump. We are just so politically divided right now in the United States. It's just best to steer clear of that discussion. So when you're talking about just visiting a place, you don't really have to get involved in the political rhetoric that goes on. Okay, the next one is a real sticking point with me and one of the things that I really don't like about the United States. Never think you can rely on public transportation. Other than a few cities like New York and DC, the public transportation systems in the United States are not very good. If you're in smaller towns or rural areas, it's basically non-existent. We are very much a car culture in the United States, and that's kind of how we get around. We don't really have a good nationwide train system, and the ones we have, they're not very fast. So you can't transit from city to city by train and expect to get there in a reasonable time. You're going to have to either drive or hop on a plane. That's just how it is in the United States. I know it sucks, so just be prepared to not use public transportation. Okay, the next one, never call soccer Football. Football is a completely different thing in the United States than it is in the rest of the world. It does not matter that your football is the most popular sport in the world. In the United States, American football is the most popular sport, and we just call it football. You can try, but you're never gonna convince an American that soccer is better than American football. Someone like Ronaldo could walk around the United States and most people would not recognize him. Next, never expect Americans to be able to speak any other language than English. Unfortunately, it's just not something we prioritize. I'm also definitely guilty of this. Because of the influence of US pop culture and tourism, almost everywhere I've been able to get by with English. For better or worse, we don't really need to speak another language, so we haven't made it a priority in the United States. I know this is a little bit of a generalization, and I have some friends that are bilingual, but for the most part, Americans tend to speak only English. Number 9, never expect our pharmacies to just sell pharmaceutical stuff. In most other countries, pharmacies only have pharmaceutical stuff. In the United States, pharmacies are more like general stores. They have a little bit of everything. In most CVS's, Walgreens, Rite Aids, you can buy your pharmaceutical stuff. You can also buy food. You can buy toys. You can even buy beach equipment. Our pharmacies aren't just pharmacies. Another little side note, it's really hard to get a drug to market in the United States, so things that are commonly available at pharmacies throughout the world might not be available in US pharmacies. So just be aware of that when you travel to the United States. Rule number 10, never drink if you are under 21 years of age. Most of the rest of the world has a much lower drinking age than the United States. In Vietnam, you can drink at any age. In the US, drinking laws are very, very strict. So make sure if you're under 21 that you're not trying to buy or drinking alcohol. Another side note is never drink in public. Most cities and states have strict open container laws, which means if you're walking around with alcohol and it's open, you can be ticketed or fined. Okay, so those are my things to never do in the United States. Do you have anything to add? If you do, make sure you put it down in the comments. If you disagree with some of the things I said, make sure you also comment. Hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and see you next week.